cooperation with our network of allies and partners that span the globe is a force multiplier. Our allies and partners bring to the table unique perspectives and ideas, capabilities and military forces, and the human capital needed to craft standards that allow them and us to interoperate. Mutual benefit of these relationships is recognized in the 2022 National Defense Strategy. We maintain strong alliances and partnerships by developing warfighting capabilities together with allies and partners. DSPO, and to no small extent, Latasha Beckman, is involved in standardization endeavors with the NATO Committee for Standardization and the NATO Standardization Management Group, and the Material Standardization and Harmonization Team. We work to bring the DSP and standardization community together to develop the procedures and policies to facilitate engagement with our allies and partners. The byproducts of DoD's engagement with allies and partners is the purpose of this panel. I'm pleased to welcome our outstanding panelists, Mr. Richard Kurasiewicz, and from the Department of the Army, and Mr. David Flowers from the Department of the Navy on the topic of standardization in support of multinational interoperability. So, Mr. Kurasiewicz is the U.S. National Coordinator for the American, British, Canadian, Australian, and New Zealand, or ABCANZ Armies program, the Multinational Coordination Division in the Strategy, Policy, and Plans Directorate, Headquarters, Department of the Army, G357. The AAP aims to optimize interoperability through information sharing, cooperation, and collaboration in the continuous pursuit of interoperability in order to integrate and leverage the capabilities of all member armies. In this capacity, as the U.S. National Coordinator since August 2021, he is overall responsible to plan, program, budget, coordinate, and execute the U.S. Army's participation in the AAP. He coordinates the U.S. Army International Operations, technical and administrative staff, officer subject matter expert participation in ABCANZ capability and support groups and project teams. He staffs for review or ratification all ABCANZ standards and publications, including distribution and release to NATO and other multinational fora. Mr. David Flowers spent 18 months as a planning, programming, budgeting, and execution analyst for OPNAV N2 and 6F1 Assured Command and Control, and then since 2015 as Department of Navy civilian, he has been assigned as the Deputy of the Allied and Coalition Interoperability for W Division, which is the Crypto, Electronic, and Cyber Warfare Division. He is responsible for coalition and allied information warfare engagement. And prior to that, Mr. Flowers was enlisted in the Navy, commissioned as an information warfare officer, and spent several tours as an individual augment and on board several ships. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Kurasiewicz for his presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Rich Kurasiewicz, and I'm the ABCANZ U.S. National Coordinator. I'll provide a brief overview of the ABCANZ Armies program and try to answer some questions afterwards. And I have the dubious honor of being the first speaker after lunch, where people are struggling to stay awake, so I'll try to be quick and succinct. Next. The mission of the program is to assess and develop multi-domain interoperability and inform modernization and generate mutually beneficial activities to demonstrate the collective strength of the ABCANZ Armies and the Marine Corps. There's a famous quote from Winston Churchill. I won't bother reading it. So the program goes back to 1947 when it was first established because of the good relationships and rapport that occurred during World War II. It consisted of the US, Britain, and Canada. In '63, Australia joined. In '64, they created a basic standardization agreement, which is the legal foundation document for, at that time, was ABCA program. In 1965, New Zealand became an observer. Marine Corps became an associate member in 2004, and New Zealand became a full member in 06. We'll start with the box on the left to describe sort of the structure of the program itself. You have the Executive Council consists of the vice or the deputies of each of the armies, and they provide the strategic guidance for the program. They meet annually once a year to do that. The national directors, they provide the operational guidance. They're at the 1 and 2 star level. For the U.S., it's the director of G35 strategy, policy, and plans. They meet at least quarterly or virtually, and once a year in an annual meeting in the spring. The program office is responsible to the national directors for the management of the program through coordination of program activities and groups, publication and dissemination of ABCANZ products, collection and dissemination of coalition lessons, liaison with JIM agencies and fora, and provision of program secretariat support. National coordinators are the single point of contact for the ABCANZ program in the armies. They are responsible to their own Army's national director for overseeing, coordinating, and facilitating meetings and publication and dissemination of products. The coordinators and the program office are the only full-time ABCANZ positions. Everybody else within the program has a daytime job and only do this work on a limited part-time basis. Going down again on the left, capability groups comprise national representatives in the rank of colonel who are knowledgeable in their specific capability area. They seek to optimize coalition interoperability. They conduct interoperability gap analysis, propose tasks to mitigate identified gaps, establish project teams to conduct approved tasks, and manage the program products for the capability group. There are 5 capability groups. Command, all aspects of command and control of coalition forces within operational battle space. Sense, all aspects of the provision of intelligence-related activities. Act, all aspects of the employment of coalition forces and the exercise of coalition combat power. All aspects of the protection of coalition forces to ensure the forces' survivability. There are also 3 support groups, also led by 06s, who are knowledgeable in the group's support area, in the areas of lessons, training, and concept and capability development. The purpose of the program is to allow the warfighter to focus on battle, involves the 5 partners in the Marine Corps, focuses on providing interoperability through enduring and regionally agnostic doctrinal, technological, human, and procedural solutions. It's a mechanism for cooperation and to promote strategic inclusivity, but tactical standards. It's an enduring mutual trust and enhances our ability to fight. ABCANZ closes interoperability gaps that NATO can't or won't. ABCANZ is complementary to NATO and exists as a forum to develop technical solutions that can be employed by partners beyond the Five Eyes community. The U.S. Army's levels of interoperability and priority focus areas in the AR-34-1 were directly borrowed from the ABCANZ Armies program, which had the resources to focus on the analysis process of closing or mitigating interoperability gaps. ABCANZ provides an opportunity for senior leaders' strategic engagement not available in other fora. Each nation equitably provides the resources necessary to run the program. As you can see, from 1947 to the present, the program has evolved. It started out as a standardization program similar to NATO. And then after Afghanistan and Iraq, they had a program review and turned the focus to interoperability to impact the warfighter and the cooperation and success on the battlefield as a coalition. It continued to evolve through the years, developing a strategy and for 2020 and 2016, and then strategy 2035 in 2020, mirrored more or less on U.S. Army's approach. So initial operating capability at the compatible level, I'll cover that a little later, was supposed to be in 2020. It got delayed to 2021 due to COVID. The goal for FOC, full operation capability, is in 2027 to be integrated, and by 2035 to be MDO or multi-domain operations ready. There are discussions to possibly shift to the right the goals and aspirations, since the U.S. Army is in the process of doing that. Why are we doing this? Interoperability is the foundational to how the ABCANZ armies and USMC will meet the challenges of future competition and conflict. We also not only have global competition, but the use of emergent technology that is continually changing. The global community will be more reliant on technology in areas such as advanced computing, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, robotics, directed energy, hypersonic weaponry, and biotechnology. That means we are in a constant process of study, evolution, and sometimes revolution. Interoperability is the ability to act together coherently, effectively, and efficiently to achieve allied tactical, operational, and strategic objectives. We use these definitions, and they came from NATO. We use 3 levels. Level 0 would be not interoperable, but we started out as deconflicted several years ago. We reached level 2 compatible in 2021 at the Joint Warfighting Assessment 2021. And our goal or aspiration is to be at level 3 integrated, able to merge seamlessly, and are interchangeable. And the focus is at the 2-star framework nation headquarters, that any one of the partners could lead the 2-star headquarters with brigades from the other nations and Marine Corps underneath. There's an operational process for the program. The processes are specified with an activity for each process and a specific output. So beginning on the left, going to the right, we have start out with lessons identification from national and multinational training, exercises, and operations. We are also currently including Ukraine, and there's a lot of lessons learned or oils collected, observations, insights, and lessons from the Ukraine conflict. Then we do gap or opportunity analysis to determine gaps, and then there are meetings. We obtain strategic guidance from the Executive Council and get direction. And there's project planning that occurs at an annual meeting where the national directors approve a program for the following year, which is on the order of 30 to 35 project teams to be conducted to develop scoping reports, standards, TSORs, technical statements of requirements or statements of requirement. More on that later. Then we have twice a year, 2 to 3 week integrated planning sessions where we have meetings of project teams across the capability and support groups on the order of possibly 15 at each, and to enhance collaboration and cooperation. And a lot of times for a lot of the activities for any one of the groups, capability group command, which primarily deals with CIS issues, communications and information systems, is the key group that interfaces with all of them. For example, for the development of a common operating picture. And so it's only when you have larger sessions like this can you accomplish those objectives. Then there are products produced. Those products are staffed through the nations, and nations for standards, they ratify them. And then they go into national doctrine. One of the systemic problems in the ABCANZ program, possibly our sister services, is so you may have a standard, but to get a standard into national doctrine can take at least 5 years because it's based on schedules. There are recurring schedules where publications doctrine are routinely updated, and if you're out of cycle, you have to wait for the next cycle because you have limited resources and people are working on other doctrinal publications. Once you publish a publication, then you get it into the schoolhouses to train the officers, NCOs, and soldiers. And then those officers, soldiers, and NCOs then have to train on them. So it can easily be a 5-year process before a standard gets into doctrine. In the meantime, the review process within the program is 3 years. So conceivably, we're even before a standards is in doctrine, we are already developing the follow-on version. And so they're already looking at the feasibility of just publishing addenda to existing doctrine to expedite the process. They're also looking at publishing ATPs, Army training publications, that can be published much more quickly and put out to the military community. This is what the annual rhythm, battle rhythm looks like. We have several meetings, physical meetings of the national coordinators, and as well as monthly virtual meetings. There's an annual spring meeting, which I mentioned. That's where they develop the program for the following year. All the tasks based on the strategic direction that was received, and the key interoperability gaps that need to be worked or any standards that need to be updated. And then in the spring and the fall, there are 2 integrated project sessions where project teams meet. We are dispersing that so that there's some project team meetings that are going to be occurring separately, and that's perfectly fine, so that we're not, it takes a lot of effort to, for, let's say, 15 or 20 project teams. Each nation may need to provide at least one representative, sometimes two. Command will have 3 or 4 or 5 people to corral all these people, get their availability, and have them take off for a week or two from their day-to-day jobs, which is a challenge. And then in the fall, we have the Executive Council meeting, where the Executive Council meets with the national directors, and they provide guidance, strategic direction, modification, or yes, we're on the right track, keep going, or from their level of what they see is what are the needs that we need to refocus on, and maybe adjust the way forward. So what we deliver, I mentioned standards, define levels of standardization or interoperability to be achieved and maintained in a specified material, procedural, or technical area. And when ratified, as I mentioned, they're embedded in national doctrine and policy. Technical statements of requirement and statements of requirement provide the minimum set of requirements or specifications for equipment or systems to interoperate in the future. So if we don't have a system yet, let's say for the COP, they can come up with a TSOR and to put it out to the community. This is what the Five Eyes are recommending for the product. SORs provides the minimum set of requirements or specification for services and or applications. Publications, there are, we have something like the Coalition Operations Handbook, which is our oldest and probably best well-known product. It just recently received an update, I forget the 11th or 12th edit, but it's also a field manual in the Army, and it's also a NATO STANAG. Every project team meeting also produces a report. That report either just scopes an issue or provides recommendations for further work in that area on the road to develop a standard. And usually it will take 2 to 4 project teams to develop a standard. So how do we make this work? Is through the full resourcing of critical project activity, the provision for thorough testing and evaluation of ABCANZ Armies program products within the multinational training environment. So we have had the UK participate in multiple warfighter exercises, which is our top readiness exercise, and in joint, ABCANZ has participated in 3 joint warfighting assessments, and is also participating in Project Convergence 22 and 23. The ratification and implementation of ABCANZ standards, and as well as validating that they are being implemented, and acknowledgement that the program is a mutually supporting activity in the medium to deliver enduring change. Some strengths as closing remarks. ABCANZ is more agile than NATO due to its smaller size. It strictly focuses identifying and mitigating interoperability gaps, mutual trust and understanding in a common language, and strategic engagement at senior leader levels. The program itself is limited to 5 eyes, but some standards and statements of requirement are not releasable outside of ABCANZ. This concludes my presentation. Do we go to questions now or later?
Oh, let's hold questions till the end.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Mr. Flowers?
But you can now. I'm going to eat this little thing. I guarantee it's going to be gone by the end of my presentation. So, the ABCANZ presentation, the AUSCANZUKUS presentation. So everything he said about ABCANZ is on the land, right? Everything I say about AUSCANZUKUS is very similar, almost exactly, but we're in the maritime environment. That concludes my presentation. Do I have any questions? I was being facetious, but also that's very true because we do very much the same things in both groups. Now, my presentation is going to cover a little bit more territory because in our organization within OPNAV, right, the Senior Navy Staff, we do more than just AUSCANZUKUS, and I want to share that with you as well. And I appreciate your patience with that. When I asked Latasha why she wanted me here, she said, well, you know, interoperability is important. I said, yeah, but we don't really deal with standards that much. She said, yeah, but standards build interoperability. And that's true. So if you're sitting there wondering, why is this guy talking to me? Well, interoperability would be easy if everybody built to standards, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. But standards they're not sexy, for lack of a better word. Neither is interoperability. It's usually the last thought in the room, right? Hey, I'm going to build this great new whiz-bang gadget here. We're going to be able to talk, and we won't even need any equipment. Are you going to build that to standards? You don't understand. This is too important to focus on standards. We just need to build it, right? So it's not interoperable. It's not going to have standards, but we can talk in the United States Navy. So that's kind of the problem that we have, that leadership doesn't talk about interoperability a lot. Sometimes they don't talk about standards a lot, but everybody in this room, know that they're very important. So without further ado, so this is the OPNAV N2N6 W4 presentation. Again, David Flowers, I'm the Deputy of Allied and Coalition Interoperability. Next slide. So this is a little org chart. You can see up the top there is the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare. So that's Vice Admiral Trussler. He's my boss. He's a 3-star. And he reports directly to the CNO on anything that has to do with intelligence and information warfare. So he's the DCNO for information warfare, but he's also the Senior Naval Intelligence Officer. So when it comes to ONI, when it comes to all the efforts over there in Suitland, he directs them as well. So if you take a look at the far right-hand side, the second box from the end there, the W box, Mr. Bill Flynn is my direct report. Next slide. And this is what his organization looks like. You can see across the blocks on the bottom there, all the different W's, right? So maritime space capabilities, information operations, cyber, surface cryptology, tactical data links. These are all right in our portfolio. And then over on the end, again on the right-hand side is W4 where I work. That's coalition interoperability. What's great about this is that not just this slide, but the previous slide, we have subject matter experts on all matters of information warfare, right? Across N2N6. So when we do our AUSCANZUKUS fund or our NATO fund, and we need a subject matter expert, it's real easy for us to just grab somebody, whether he's a tactical data links expert or a surface warfare cryptologist, we can grab them and pull them into the conversation. Next slide. So for those of you that don't know information warfare from any other type of warfare, so in the United States Navy, information warfare has 3 pillars: assured command and control, battle space awareness, and integrated fires. So back in the early noughts, right, the early 2000s, N2N6 was separated. There were 2 different organizations. They brought them all together under information warfare, effectively bringing in communications, networks, intelligence, oceanography, metrology, cryptology, electronic warfare, cyberspace, and space, all into one organization, focused on information. And you could probably argue, if you think about it, that anything we do in warfare deals with information, right? If you pull a trigger and you fire a missile, you got to have targeting data or you're not going to hit anything. So if you think about it, information warfare impacts just about every aspect of warfare as we know it. So in N2 and 6, when we engage our partners, this is what we focus on. So we're not building body armor. We're not building non-corrosive material. We're building information warfare with our partners. Next slide. So this is our team, mission, functions, and tasks, right? The very top one there. So through bilateral and multilateral engagements, we enhance maritime information warfare with our partners. So we share information warfare information and capabilities so that we can fight alongside our allies. So you heard earlier the panel talking about great power competition, right? So who are the adversaries in that? It's China and the Soviet Union, right? Very capable militaries. Well, at least one of them is, I guess, right? So anyway, so if you think about it, to be able to fight alongside of our ally in an information like that, say in the South China Sea, our ally needs to be fully integrated into what we do, or we're going to end up shooting them, or they're going to shoot us, or they're going to take a missile for us, or we're going to take one from them. We've got to be fully interoperable. When it comes to our Five Eyes partners, this is extremely important because traditionally, if you take a look at history, they're the ones that fight alongside of us most of the time. But even the other ones, I mean, the last thing you want is a small Navy with one ocean-going vessel to be shot because you did something stupid, right? Integrate them into the capability, integrate them into your exercises and operations, and that way you'll be interoperable with them. So next slide. Oh, one thing I would like to say about the last slide is, if you remember Secretary Mattis's 2018 National Defense Strategy, right? I mean, his second core tenet was enable partners and make more partners. That was his like number two, line of effort. And that was a pretty big deal. And ever since then, all the national strategy that we get from the president on down to the Secretary of Defense to the CNO all focuses on that partner engagement piece because it's extremely important. Next slide. So this is our manpower, basically 8 people. We have 3 foreign officers. So the branch head is a Royal Navy commander. He was actually the information warfare commander on board the HMS Queen Elizabeth. So he has a really good background, and we're really happy. He just arrived a couple months ago, really to have Commander Chris Allen on board. So I'm the deputy. I get to do a lot of the glorious things like foreign disclosure, right? That's a joke. I don't see anybody laughing, but believe me, that's not funny. So yeah, foreign disclosure is horrible. You don't want anything to do with it unless you absolutely got to. So we have 2 LNOs. Lieutenant Commander Travis Moore is the AUSCANZUKUS staff officer. That rotates through the 4 countries. So last time it was Aussie. This time it's a Canadian. Next time a Kiwi is coming in December. And then we have an AUSCANZUKUS experimentation lead, which is Lieutenant Commander Mike Dempsey, also from the Royal Canadian Navy. And what's great about Mike is that he's done experimentation pretty much all his life. So when he comes to our team, he's focusing his experimentation on our Five Eyes partners, which is quite exciting. Just take my word for it. So I also have 2 active duty officers, 1 cryptologist, 1 information professional. So one focuses mostly on cyber. The other one focuses on IT systems, right? Assured command and control. Remember that information warfare side? It was the assured command and control. That's what IPs focus on. And then we have 2 contractors that are really provide good core support for our team. So as far as strategic guidance, next, there you go. The president, when he came to office, he put out his interim guidance, and it says it right there in bold, but I'll read it to you. We will only succeed in advancing American interests and upholding our universal values by working in common cause with our closest allies and partners. Right? And that's an absolute fact. I mean, that's something the bad guys don't actually have, but we do have it. Next slide. And then if you take a look at all the strategic guidance that comes in from the Department of the Navy, whether it's the CNO's NAV plan, whether it's the Tri-Service Maritime Strategy, that's Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Navy, or whether it's the Secretary of the Navy giving us guidance, it all focuses on our key strategic advantage is our long-term, our allies, key allies and partners. And that's just a fact you can't get away from. Next slide. So these are our major lines of effort. You see AUSCANZUKUS up at the top. A lot of history, just like Rich gave on ABCANZ. So after World War II, it was focused on making sure that our partners could share record message traffic with us. And then it was communications, and then it was command and control. And then in the early noughts, again, that word, right? You like it, I know. It was information warfare. So we kind of shifted to a broader portfolio. So AUSCANZUKUS, I also have a program of record for AUSCANZUKUS that supports that experimentation. So if I have $1 million, $1.5 million, and the other four navies come with that same amount of money, then we have about $7 million that we can use experimentation at venues like RIMPAC, Trident Warrior, Information Warrior, Joint Warrior, so that we can come together and we can do testing and identify those gaps in interoperability so that we can correct those. So the other N2N6 sponsored forum is the second one there, the Multinational Maritime Information Services Board, M2I2, which is, again, focused on that assured command and control piece, right? It started as a Centrix user forum, but now we use it for more than just Centrix. We talk about BICES, we talk about MPE, Mission Partner Environment, if you know that term. We talk about BICES, Centrix. We talk about any communications capabilities that we have in the Navy and how to better them. A lot of our partners have Centrix. They get it via FMS, or it's loaned to them, or they get it through FMF cases. But they have it. They use it for a while. They forget how to use it. M2I2 brings subject matter experts to these nations so that if they have problems with their equipment, we can help them figure it out. We also have interactions with NATO through 3 key NATO meetings as well. We do bilateral engagements, specifically through the CCIB capabilities, and then we have U.S.-only efforts that come in the form of exceptions to national disclosure policy, technology transfer and security assistance review boards, and others as well. Next slide. So AUSCANZUKUS, we kind of went over this a little bit, but AUSCANZUKUS is focused on 3 things. Fight tonight, which is what you bring to the fight with you. So when you show up on day 1, what can you do with your partners? That's fight tonight. Fight through is securing those systems so that when you're conducting operations, nobody can get into them and spoof them or make you do stupid things or take advantage of you. And then fight tomorrow are the capabilities that we're developing now so that we can have better interoperability in the future. So AUSCANZUKUS happens twice a year, so it's biannual. There's a supervisory board, executive steering committee, and a bunch of working groups. So the supervisory board is is chaired by Vice Admiral Trussler, and around the table from him are all the other 1-stars from the other Navy, all information warfare specialists. So the supervisory board provides tasking to the ESC. The ESC works that tasking and then doles it out to each of the working groups and then holds their feet to the fire so they can provide the information that the supervisory board is asking for. That's how AUSCANZUKUS works. Once in the fall, once in the spring. In the spring, it rotates through the countries. In the fall, it's always over here in the MARC Center. So the last 2 weeks of this October, we're going to be in the MARC Center doing working group and ESC stuff, and really looking forward to it. It's so nice not to be doing video anymore. Video takes twice as much effort, and you get about 25% of the benefits from it. It's really just a huge pain, in my humble opinion. So from these last meetings in Canberra in March of this year, the supervisory board chairman, which we all now know is Vice Admiral Trussler, wrote his communique, which kind of lays out what we need to be doing for interoperability. He also wrote a SecRel letter to the other chiefs of navies saying that we need to get after interoperability quicker and faster. We need to make it better, at least among the Five Eyes partners. And if anybody needs the unclassified memo, happy to share it with you. I can do that today. If you have a SIPRNet address, I'm happy to share the other letter to you as well. We're also responsible for ACP 202, which is Communications Interoperability Requirements for Information Exchange in a Maritime Environment. So that's an ACP, so it's an allied Five Eyes publication that we also give to NATO, and they make it into one of their own publications. So that's kind of where that standards piece comes in there. Next slide. And this is what the organization looks like. Supervisory board up at the top, Maritime Cryptologic Committee, executive steering committee, and then all the working groups underneath that. And the next time we meet with the supervisory board is going to be in March of next year in the UK, hopefully in London, because Portsmouth isn't so much fun. Next slide. So M2I2, again, this is the only bilateral or the only international Centrix user forum that's available to our coalition partners. We bring about 30 nations to the table twice per year, and we talk about how to operate better between U.S. and our allies. And also our allies also get together during this meeting and talk about how to work better with one another. And we get a lot of stuff done, not only in the main forum, but in the sidebars as well. A lot of little stuff gets fixed. Last time I was face-to-face in M2I2 was in Rome, where one of our NATO partners came to me and said, you know, you have this ship, it's the Lewis and Clark. And when you have it in Geeks, it's Lewis and the @ sign, Clark. And our system can't process that @ sign. It just messes it up every time. So we have to delete that contact in there every time it pops in. So I went to Fleet Forces Command. I said, hey, can you fix this? They fixed it. It was gone. It's now a slash. So that when they look on Geeks, they can actually see the Lewis and Clark. It's little things like that that I know may not mean much to some folks, but NATO was very appreciative. So those are the little things that we can fix at a board like M2I2. And you can see the key topics of discussion there on the second major bullet. We do a lot of things, including talking about operating in a denied, degraded, intermittent, or low bandwidth environment. In the Navy, we just call that the maritime environment, right? So we're kind of used to it. And we also talk about hybrid warfare and gray zone operations as well. Now, here's the key. If you don't take away anything else, this is very important, okay? The next M2I2 is going to be in Turku, Finland, right? Next month, September. So I'll be there and you'll be here. Maybe not, just kidding. Next slide. So this is what M2I2 looks like. So over on the left-hand side, you have the executive steering group, you have the ops and training group, and then you have the technical cyber working group. We go into plenary, we talk about some general topics, we share general topics, and then we break out into these groups. In the middle, member nations, Navy commands, U.S. commands, and member organizations, all the ones that are in red actually showed up at this M2I2, which was virtual. The good thing about virtual is you usually do get more of an audience because they don't have to pay to travel. But right now we have almost 130 people registered for Turku, and we're still over a month out. So next slide. So these are our NATO groups. The MC3CAT reports directly to the C3B. And what we do is we provide maritime expertise to the C3B and to other capability panels. So even topics of standards, when they come up, we address those and we try to reconcile those. Also, the Joint Command and Control Community of Interest, it's an acquisition group that reports directly to the main armaments groups. And then last but not least, is the Maritime Information Services Conference, the MISC, which is a functional services group, focuses on maritime C2. The old system, MSIS, is going away, and NATO has a new system that's coming on board. Who knows what that'll look like, but it's not going to be here tomorrow. It'll take a while. Next slide. So, and these are our bilateral meetings. So besides AUSCANZUKUS, besides M2I2, we'll also do bilateral engagement in line with the CNO's guidance for building alliances and partnerships, right? The NGBAP. He specifically told us that we would focus on Australia, on UK, on France, and on Japan. So from the Echelon level in the Pentagon, those are the nations that we focus on the most. And all the other nations, we've been directed to support the COCOMs in their interoperability discussions, which is exactly what we do. Next slide. These are our ongoing areas of interest. Some of these will look very familiar to you. Project Overmatch. I believe Rich mentioned Project Convergence. Overmatch is our Project Convergence, and it's all about JADC2, right? Enabling JADC2, because JADC2 is supposed to be built on standards. As a matter of fact, they're supposed to be using the same standards that the FMN group, Federated Mission Networking Group, is building for NATO. Supposed to be built on the same standards, with the idea that If we built the NATO standards, the FMN standards, then we'll be interoperable with NATO. We'll also be interoperable with NATO nations, which is an added bonus as well. Next slide. So this is our engagement plan. 2023 was scaled down significantly because of COVID, but boy, it exploded. I could fill a half a page with what's happened that wasn't on this schedule in 2023. As a matter of fact, next week I go to a CCIB forum in Garmisch, Germany, which is horrible if you've ever been there. It's not that wonderful. So, but we've got a lot of things going on in 2023, and I'm sure it's just going to get more expansive because interoperability is not going to go away, and we need to get more of it. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation, pending any questions.
No, thank you, gentlemen. So I'll start us off with just a general question. Throughout this conference, we'll hear about ways in which activities across the DoD are adapting standards and their procedures to accommodate technological advancements. Are members of ABCANZ or AUSCANZUKUS equally keeping pace with the adoption and implementing of standards?
Our biggest area of focus is communication and information systems, and those are continually evolving. We're developing, as I mentioned earlier, every 3 years, updating those standards. I will say that while a NATO standard, STANAG, will give you a what and a why, a ABCANZ standard will tell you how. So even our JMEI standards provide templates that you just fill out and are a lot easier to use at the user level. We also, our CIS team is also tied into our CAD, which is our Doctrine Development Center in Fort Leavenworth. We also have our interoperability proponent located at Fort Leavenworth that's involved in the interoperability and cross-leveling between ABCANZ and our key strategic partners at staff talks and other fora. And then we have a team of contractors that support the CIS. For example, we were the big exponents of MPE, or Mission Partner Environment. In a warfighter exercise, we had one with the UK. It was a total disaster. They were passing sticky notes because they couldn't talk to each other. And we implemented MPE, showed them how to do it, and implemented that. Now we've developed something called the CS Hub, Common Services Hub, that is much more effective and expeditionary, and our CIS standards are FMN compliant. I mentioned earlier, there was a team from CALL, Center for Army Lessons Learned, as well as some of our folks, spent like 2 months in Poland gathering lessons learned from the Ukraine conflict. And that is also being worked by the ABCANZ program. So we anticipate some changes, modifications to our approaches to interoperability. And a lot of the updates that occur in standards, TSORs, and so forth are driven by technology. The technology changes, the system changes. The Army's in transition, for example, from CPOF Command Post of the Future to CPC, Command Post Computing Environment. And so the Army's in transition. We're working standards to keep up so that they're more current with something as simple as that. CIS remains the key because if you cannot talk or share information, all the other capabilities or priority focus areas become irrelevant.
So I agree with Rich. So there's a lot to unpack there, though. And one thing that I would say, and he did bring it out, and I did as well in my presentation, is that I think working with coalition partners, they're not going to sugarcoat it. They'll tell you when they think you're messing something up, and they'll remind you that you're not building the standards. And when you work with the Five Eyes partners, they're constantly doing it. You know, you need to build a standards. You need to build a standards. And when it comes to our new CIS systems, right? So again, Project Convergence, Overmatch, and the Air Force's ABMS. So those are all part of JADC2. Those are all going to be built to standards. So they're going to be interoperable with each other and interoperable with our coalition partners. So at least from this perspective, where we sit at right now, we see a lot of interoperability in the future based on those standards.
No questions online in the room? In the back?
Yeah, my name is Captain Michelle Day. I'm with the U.S. military delegation at NATO headquarters. And I don't so much have a question, my apologies, but this is really the only place that it fits into the conversation over the next 2 days. I just wanted to put out that NATO is hosting a workshop on the use of civil standards in February, and the focus is going to be on the adoption of civil standards in the emerging and disruptive technologies arena. So if anybody would like more information on that, please let me know. And then I also just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of the DIANA within NATO, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. They have 10 accelerator sites that provide financing, mentorship, and business opportunities. There are 60 innovation sites and there are 50 dedicated test sites. Because I know we haven't focused a lot on NATO here, but considering that's what I do for full-time standardization and interoperability for the United States within NATO, I just thought that it fit into this conversation best. So thank you.
Thank you. Another question in the back?
For a second, steal somebody's seat. So I work with ABCANZ pretty closely. So I work with ABCANZ. I'm on the geospatial project team. And one of the things that comes up periodically is what is the relationship for things Navy or Air Force and ABCANZ, where we are focused on Armies, but particularly when we start talking about geospatial things, cyber things, some of these other technologies and standards that we're developing. Just what is the crosstalk between these two organizations that both have similar missions, but obviously in different spaces, but at some point, generally, things come together somewhere. It's usually within a wartime scenario, so.
At least I think I got it. So what I would tell you is that in the Pentagon, we have something called the multifora, which not only ABCANZ and AUSCANZUKUS, but the other multifora, some of them not Five Eyes, some of them Three Eyes, some of them Four Eyes, come together and they collaborate. I was just asking Rich about that right before we started, because neither one of us has been to one of those meetings in a while because they don't really do a lot of crosstalk, which is what they're designed to do. So I would say that piece has been neglected. However, I will say this. So they work with the Army, we work with the Navy. Pick a country, right? Like Australia. Yeah. So their Army, their Navy in Australia works hand in hand with one another. The capabilities that the Royal Australian Navy built from us, they take to the rest of the ADF because their forces are very different from ours, right? Their maritime air arm is their Air Force. They don't have any Marine Corps, that's their Army. So it's really up to them to try to integrate those capabilities. So if we're talking about a long-range fire capability, It's not going to be a Navy long-range fire thing. It's going to end up being an ADF, an Australian Defence Force capability that their Army shares with their Air Force that shares with their Navy. So in a lot of instances, it's really up to them to integrate those pieces. But I absolutely agree. If you say we're not doing it better, I think we could integrate better. But sometimes it's hard enough just getting through those stovepipes that exist in one Navy. And I hate to point at one country, but we have some. You think we have stovepipes in our military, right? In our DoD, but I tell you, there's a bunch of militaries out there, a bunch of navies out there that are so stovepiped. Sometimes it's almost impossible to deal with them. So
I'd like to pile on, as I was telling Dave before we started talking, is that our multinational interoperability is probably stronger than our inter-service interoperability, because the Air Force, Navy, the Army have all gone in different directions, and then you try to communicate with each other. You don't have compatible systems or different frequencies and so forth. So that is a challenge. That's a real good benefit out of JADC2, that it's joint and it's going to bring the services together. Sort of going back to actually the previous question, all the time I heard something mentioned, it's like cyber. Well, we're looking at information operations, advanced manufacturing, robotics and autonomous distribution, aerial resupply, distribution, contracting, tactical radios. They're looking to upgrade all the tactical radios. And the biggie right now, and it was very difficult to even set up the meetings because of the Ukraine conflict, but all the subject matter experts are tied up in air missile defense and counter small UAS, and that actually cuts across the services. And I agree with Dave that we probably could do better work in the multi-fora. For us, the program, as I mentioned earlier, the program office actually interfaces with the multi-fora on behalf of the program. Now, in terms of NATO, well, next to me in my office, I have Ms. Molly Bush, who's a dear colleague, and she is the NATO Land Standardization Board representative, so we work quite closely together, but separately on our own programs.
So just one last question. You mentioned the pace at which the international or multinational standardization and interoperability initiatives move, and it takes time, and so does the development of standards. We've heard for several years now about modular open systems approaches and architectures that rely on interoperability at a subsystem level or component level. Has any of that bubbled up to to affect interoperability at a nation-to-nation level and between forces and systems?
Well, so I'm not a subject matter expert in that. I'm more of an administrator pushing these standards out for ratification. However, literally all the majority of the participants in all the project teams are active duty military, and the U.S. uses the most civilians, but in general, our subject matter experts are active duty military, and as I mentioned, we covered topics like advanced manufacturing, robotics, and autonomous distribution. And these are like brand new subjects, cyber is continually evolving, and they participate in information operations as well as CIS. So we have the most current information. We try to keep it current among the nations. Some of the nations, because of lack of resources, don't have expertise in some of these areas. And very often, because the U.S. does, or we have SMEs in those areas, we will often be leading project teams in some of these areas in developing standards or scoping and pointing in the direction to future work for further development.
So I know this is kind of my go-to answer here, but those projects that we're working inside the services for JADC2, like Overmatch specifically, incorporates all the technologies that you're talking about, right? I mean, all the newest and latest greatest technologies they're looking at to develop capabilities like CAS, right? Communications as a service, so that no matter what communications you have, they're all going to fall into like one basket, so that if you get into an environment where maybe you don't have any satellite communications, the capabilities that you have will go over your existing comms pipes, and it'll be automatic, and it doesn't, doesn't create as large a ruffle as it would in normal operations, right? So they're building things like zero trust architecture and data center security to make networks more secure, more accessible, and more reliable in a contested environment, because we know that's where we're going to be next. If it does happen, it's going to be in that contested environment. So I think all those projects that are working to develop JADC2 from the services are going to develop those technologies that enable us to operate in that environment, and that means leveraging the latest and greatest.
All right, I think that concludes this panel. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your insight.